Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Should we just say it ended 3-0? Leave it there? That sounds good, doesn't it? We kind of have to tell the whole story of how that scoreline came to pass. There's plenty more to that story. Tottenham are through to the FA Cup fourth round. Let's start with that. They kind of got the job done in the end, but my goodness, there was a scary moment, especially in the 96th minute. I should state, I actually enjoyed my day in Tamworth, despite Spurs doing their utmost to spoil it. Left the house in the early hours of the morning, technically this morning, because I'm, kind of yesterday morning. I'm recording this very late at night, as has been a habit recently. -6 the temperature was when I left on the journey. Cancelled train at Euston, that was fun. Jumping on another train that went up to Rugby. Thank you very much to the group of 3 Spurs fans who kind of were helping me trying to find different routes up to Tamworth. And then very kindly, when we got to Tamworth, eventually via slightly differing routes that we were originally going to go on, they very kindly asked if I wanted to jump in their taxi, so it saved me a 20-minute walk. Saved my knackered legs from marathon training and injuring myself constantly. And yeah, we got there. We got there with about 12 minutes until kickoff, I think it was. Not what I'd originally intended, but, added to the drama of the day and the FA Cup adventure, as it were. And I really enjoyed myself at the actual ground, the Lamb ground. Took me back to my non-league roots. Anyone that's kind of watched these over the years knows that's where I started with my sports reporting. Grounds exactly like that. Sometimes much lower, kind of down the pyramid as well. And even in those days, to be fair, I actually did get a seat in the press box. Today I didn't, because there were so few seats available in the in that area for anyone. There was like club officials, things like that up there. The majority of the journalists, we were stood by the sidelines, which I really enjoyed. I did. It was like kind of almost watching it as a fan again, kind of down at ground level. And yeah, we were just to the right of the right of them, the travelling Tottenham fans as well. They were to our left. And yeah, it was kind of, when we're in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, you can kind of feel frustration and things like that en masse. You can feel them coming from the South Stand as a whole. You can feel it from all these areas. But to kind of be almost right in back among Spurs fans again, which is obviously my past before journalism and all that, it's, it was really fascinating to hear. And you can hear the individual shouts as well of frustration, certainly about a certain German winger on occasions. Yeah, it was weird, because I couldn't even, sorry to go into the kind of nitty-gritty of journalism side of it, but sometimes people like to hear this, some people don't, but just in case you're wondering, when you stand obviously by the sidelines, you can't use your laptop. There's nowhere to put it. So I kind of had to go back a bit old school in a way, using my phone to kind of write little notes in and things like that. And although back in the day it would have been just a notebook I would have used, yeah. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I felt really excited for Tamworth as well. Back in my non-league reporting days, I covered a couple of big FA Cup televised games for Ware FC, Bishop Stortford FC. I don't know why to say the FC, their football clubs. And I know how huge it was for the town and the clubs and all the volunteers involved and everything. So I kind of got to see that as a journalist with Tamworth. Kind of got like we got to see with Marine a few years back under Jose. And it was a great occasion, and in the end, the Spurs got the result. But my goodness, they put us through the mill for it. They really did. There was that moment I kind of alluded to there, the 96th minute. Antonin or Tony, as he's called around the place now, Kinski dives onto a volley towards him, and thankfully for Spurs, gets to it, holds it quite comfortably on the floor. Everyone kind of just exhales a kind of a breath of relief for the Spurs head on, and anyone connected with Tamworth probably a kind of a howl of frustration. That was the kind of big moment. I mean, it's obvious. It's not me coming out with incredible insight, but I said to a couple of journalists, if this goes to extra time, Spurs are going to win. It's just an unfortunate byproduct of all of the energy and effort that Tamworth have put into this. They're not going to have a fitness level that is going to match the Premier League players. And obviously, Spurs have got other people off the bench that they can bring on, as they did. And we shouldn't forget that, they were so close, Tamworth, to a team that is full of part-time players. These aren't full-time working players. They've had a bit of a rapid rise up the leagues, Tamworth, in the last couple of years, but they've got part-time players, people working in shops, a zip seller, which I thought was amazing, a financial advisor, a bricklayer, and so on, and kind of things like that. That kind of those kind of different jobs, which is kind of a bit of a cliche when you get to this round of the FA Cup and there's a non-league team in it, but for many of them, it's a fact of life. These players are training as much as they can each week, but they are not full-time paid footballers. They are part-time footballers, which makes what they do all the more impressive, and what Tottenham did for that 90 minutes all the more kind of pathetic in certain ways as well, I've got to be honest with you, because of the huge gulf between them. That's no disrespect to Tamworth, but they're a non-league side. They sit down. You've got to go down to Championship, League One, League Two. Then underneath that is a National League where they play. Spurs should absolutely be having far less issues, regardless of the pitch. And especially in front of the Spurs fans, have gone all that way through all the cancelled trains and freezing weather to get there. Tamworth could have easily, in that late kind of moment, sealed what would have been a historic win. Would have been right up there with giant killings against a team that has won the FA Cup 8 times, isn't it? In the end, Spurs got through, and the result kind of masks what came before it. This is not to say that, Kinski had loads to do in the Spurs goal. He was really under threat, and there was big danger throughout. But that's the part of the FA Cup. The magic of it is the smaller side hanging on, and having a big chance, which they did. Even the game, the way it started, there was a bit of the net underneath the crossbar hadn't been tied up properly. And I think the way they ended up dealing with it was one of the players ended up getting on the shoulder of another Tamworth player and tying it up themselves. And it was just a classic kind of FA Cup fare. It really was. It's why it's such an amazing kind of grand old competition. Like I said, my background is I've seen it. I've covered clubs coming up through the qualifying rounds all the way up, getting big games in the first round, let alone the third round. And it's a special competition kind of in the world as well. Other countries, they all know about it. A lot of the players, when they come over here, even if they've come over from, South America, Africa, any continent, they're coming over and they know of the FA Cup and the kind of the history that it's got. Fair play to Tamworth. Absolutely fair play to them. They weren't cheap at the Lamb Ground, if we're going to use a terrible pun. And I quite like the fact that Postecoglou, straight the final whistle, went and spoke to Andy Peakes, the Tamworth manager, and Andy Peakes' little press conference that he did afterwards. They both did press conferences kind of on the pitch, which again took me back to my interviewing the managers on the pitch days. And Andy Peakes said, "We were in the game for most of it and started really well. Ange just said to me, I should be so proud. So if he's telling me I should be proud, then why would I not be?" I actually said to Ange before the game when he said, "How are you?" I said, "I was all right until I saw your team sheet." But no, he was respectful before and said what a great job we had done here. And at the end, he was brilliant. And he said, "You gave us a right good run for our money. Be proud of your boys. They were fantastic." So we could have probably lost the same score or more to perhaps their under-21s, and people would have gone away and thought no one would come back. But for me, we wanted them to play those sort of players, because that is what it's about, really. When you draw a team like that, you want to play the best. Why not? They brought everyone on in the end because you've seen it done before where teams don't want to use them unless they have to, and he felt they had to. And they did. They certainly had to, Spurs. They really did. I guess that is the be-all and end-all, isn't it? They did not allow it to be a giant killing. They did not allow it to be an embarrassing result. But there was a couple of scares there late on. But it was just the way they played. Spurs made 225 successful final third passes, but it just couldn't really. They had a few kind of moments with just either the final pass wasn't right, or like Maddison, for example, had a couple of chances that the keeper saved, Jazz Singh, Timo Werner ran through and does unfortunately what Timo Werner does, and then was denied by the keeper as well. Werner also had a header that was cleared off the line too from, I think it was Mikey Moore's cross. So poor is Timo Werner's ability to run through in a 1v1. We knew that even against a goalkeeper who spends most of his time as a building surveyor, Djed Spence, we still kind of didn't expect him to score. And so it was the case. The keeper made a good save with, I think it was his leg, I'm trying to remember. But yeah, it's just, there was the other element of the pitch. I don't want to use it as a huge excuse, really. Sometimes they say that the pitch is a leveller in these cup games. Mostly it's because the pitch isn't in a great condition in terms of, it's boggy, there's bits of grass missing, things like that sometimes you find in non-league as the season goes on. The amount of matches I covered at various clubs where they had big dumps, areas of sand on pitches to try and get rid of kind of grassless, boggy patches. This was more about the fact that it was a 3G artificial pitch. So it's not even a 4G pitch. I think it was a 3G one, which is a kind of an earlier generation. And it's the kind of pitch that most of us, when we play outdoor kind of five-a-side, would play on. The ball will skid a little bit. The bounce is fast. And yeah, it's not anything like playing on a normal turf pitch. And that would have taken some getting used to, I would imagine, for the players. I think they trained on an artificial surface the day before, Postecoglou said. I would imagine, though, that's probably going to be 4G and like the most kind of up-to-date possible technology you can have in synthetic turf, whereas this was not that. Like I said, we interviewed Postecoglou on the pitch after the game, also walked across it afterwards, and yes, I could easily see how that ball was skidding around, and that would have taken a little bit of time certainly saw that early on, Spurs trying to get used to it, whereas for Tamworth, it's just what they play in most weeks. But still, all players play at some point in pitches like that. It shouldn't be completely alien to them and take them that long to get used to. It wasn't for me an excuse to not allow there to be a big gap between 4 levels or so between them. Look, some of them came away with credit. There were definitely some people in there that I don't think can come away kind of hanging their head in shame, as it were. I thought Kinski, we've already mentioned, I think he was a positive. Postecoglou said on Friday that it was going to start again, and the reason was because, and he wouldn't have known it, but on the day against Liverpool on his debut, he was actually quite rusty because the Czech professional league, Czech top flight, shut up for the winter in mid-December. So he hadn't actually played a game in 3 and a bit weeks or so. And yeah, he needed the minutes, so he wanted him to play in this game as well. And there was another aspect to it as well, which I actually thought was quite clever, in that he, obviously, apart from dealing with a completely different surface for him as a goalkeeper and his clearances and controlling the ball and kind of putting him under pressure that way, they also like their long throws. I was trying to remember his name now. I think it was Tommy Tonks or something like that. I've got to get his name right, because if I'm just making that up, I've got it here. It was Tom Tonks, technically, which is, I think George from PA said it was kind of like a Dave Bassett football manager style name, but he would hurl these long throws into the box, and one caused some real issues. Those, and every time Tamworth really got a free kick anywhere, they would launch into the box. I had a few corners as well, and I think that was something that, strangely enough, against Liverpool, I think we said this in the last video, something that Kinski didn't really have to deal with. And obviously, this week they're playing Arsenal, set-piece kings, as it were. So for him to just have some experience of a kind of a bruising English encounter with set pieces being a bit of the main threat for the opposition was quite a good thing for him. Of course, we're not talking about the same levels and stuff like that, but just good for him. And his handling was really, really good. I'm trying to think. I don't think he dropped anything. Like I said, there was one throw that caused some problems, but it kind of caused problems for everyone, not just him. And Postecoglou was asked about him afterwards and playing, and he said it was a good challenge for him. That's one of the unique things about Tamworth, because every time they get into your half, the ball gets into your box, whether it's a throw-in or a free kick. That's where it ends up. You have to defend in your box. Doesn't matter how well you try to keep them away, even with a throw from the halfway line. And I thought Tony and all the lads handled it really well. It's always a bit of a lottery when it comes in, particularly with the way they launch it. So it was good for Tony to get through that. In front of him, I thought Archie Gray was very good again. I've got to be very wary that people don't think I'm saying they were amazing, because I'm not. Because again, you've got to take the context of the opposition, and again, that's not being disrespectful to Tamworth, but it is saying that they're playing against a team that are so many levels kind of below them, and they should be dealing with a lot of these things that they kind of questions they pose. But I still feel like as an 18-year-old centre-back or midfielder playing at centre-back, I thought Archie Gray did well again. Radu Dragusin, it was kind of like a lot of bread and butter stuff for him with the deep long balls into the box and his aerial ability. Archie Gray is swiftly becoming a fan's favourite. You can just tell. Being able to hear the way the fans react to him, being that close to kind of... I'm trying to think what the allocation was. I feel like I've heard differing kind of things, anywhere from 750 up to 850. But yeah, they packed out kind of most of the stand down one end, and just everyone shouted for Archie Gray. And a few fans afterwards telling me, got to mention he was great. It's like, don't worry, I will. If you've watched these, you know how much I rate Archie Gray. And there was one funny moment when someone shouted, Ali, get off your phone and watch the match. I was a bit like, I'm writing my player ratings on my phone at the same time. I was trying to work and watch. Honestly, it's worse when you're looking at a laptop, because you're constantly doing that essentially, and trying to, every time you hear the crowd go, you're like, and have to look back up again, especially second half. But Archie Gray, back to him. He had this really nice moment after the final whistle when the fans were singing a little chant for him, and he was kind of on his own with them. The other players at that point had turned and gone, and he was just loving it. He was a big smile on his face. Even Peaks, the Tamworth manager, came over and asked someone to take a photo of him and Archie Gray. I think he's a Leeds fan, and I think he said that Archie had promised him a shirt as well. And just to endear himself further as just a nice young man, he was over... He did a few interviews, and then he went over to... There was a couple of kind of young fans had gathered, and he said, I'll come over and like sign stuff and everything. And this one young boy in the crowd, I don't know how old he was, maybe 8, 9, 10, something like that, and just shouted at Archie Gray, if I give you my scarf, can I have one of your boots? Oh, I think he actually can have your boots or something, I can't remember now, something like that. And Archie was like, yeah, all right then. And then he went over and gave him one of his boots, and the kid threw him his scarf. And I think at first he was like, oh, no, you can keep the scarf. And I think there's a part of him that was like, this actually might be a really nice memento. And but he's so polite. He was going to the kid, are you sure? Are you sure I can take your scarf? Are your parents going to be okay with that if I take your scarf? And he's like holding this boot, this kid thinking, oh yeah, don't worry. They'll be fine, kind of thing. It was just a really lovely moment. And then he gave the other boot to a little girl that was standing next to the kid. So I don't know whether they're related or not, but yeah, he's just a lovely guy and a very, very talented footballer. And fair play to the kid that asked, it was a cheeky request, but if you don't ask, you don't get. And it was very cool. And despite the fact he's just 18, he's so mature that they keep asking for interviews. I mean, why is Archie Gray going up to do interviews after a game where Spurs are almost embarrassed, by a non-league team? But that is a sign of him and how comfortably he is doing these interviews. And he said in the interview, I'm not going to make excuses. We were not good enough for 90 minutes. Quite a few of us were not at the races today. Notice how he says we or us. We've all played on these pitches when we were younger, so it's not different for us. In his Spurs play interview, he wasn't using it as an excuse, but he said it did feel a bit kind of strange for them. But yeah, and his actual TV interview is very much not using it as an excuse at all. Archie Gray, what a fantastic young man. Just seems a nice all-round guy. and also a terrific player as well. And look, he's going to continue in the role. He's going to be in the back line against Arsenal by the looks of it as well, unless there's a dramatic recovery in those next few days. And it's just all experience building for him, all of it. Who else was decent? I thought Basuma was good, actually. Again, tempering that with the opposition, but he just was one of the few that I felt showed the levels between the players. He was just so strong and so good on the ball, twisting and turning away from people. 15 ball recoveries he managed, just getting that ball back so many times. Made 3 blocks, 1 interception, 2 clearances, 1 headed clearance, won 12 of his 15 duels on the day that he had in the ground and the air. I thought he was one of those that just went out there and was like, yeah, this is Premier League kind of thing. And that's what they should have all done. James Maddison was like that in periods in the first half. Had a couple of chances where he was very good. And maybe just unfortunately, there was one full-length save from Singh that was very good. I did feel second half he faded a fair bit. And obviously he was the captain, so that wasn't great. Weird contrast, actually, was Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore was back, which was fantastic. Probably expected a couple of other young players, to maybe start with. I thought maybe Will Lancashire would start, but he went pretty strong in defence and midfield. Changed it up a little bit up top with Werner through the middle, Johnson on the right, and Moore on the left. First half, Mikey, he looked a bit rusty, which he's been out for 2.5 months. Absolutely understandable. But what I was really impressed with, and I think Postecoglou was as well, was that second half, he roared back to the Mikey we'd seen, before his virus. And he was just dribbling past people. Didn't look like they could get the ball off him. He was so confident. And he came off around the hour mark. And I know there was kind of starts of little sounds of boos from the crowd when he came off. And I know people on social media weren't happy and all that. But that was always going to be rough at the time, an hour in. And Postecoglou actually afterwards said it was probably more than they wanted to play him for in his first game back, because we've said it many times and we know it's the case at Spurs. You get tired, you overwork a muscle, and you get a muscle injury. So you don't want to lose him again so quickly after getting him back. He got in behind them numerous times in that second half. And like I said, that one really nice cross to the back post where Timo Werner headed it and it was cleared off the line. And Postecoglou, instead of having him back, he said it's brilliant. It's great to get him some game time. I think he's itching to get back as well. He's missed a fair bit of football. Just adds another attacking threat to us. And I'm sure after today he'll feel a lot better. As I said, I think he was a bit rusty at the start, but he definitely grew into the game. And there were a couple of players like Mikey who probably played more than I wanted him to today. But he actually grew into the game. Was having a good spell when I took him off, but he hasn't played for 2 months. Of the 5 subs, probably say 4 of the 5 made an impact. Lucas Bergvall, I thought, was really good when he came on. Again, temper that. Good in terms of upping the tempo and just his movement. The Tamworth players were tiring, and I thought his movement was really good in pulling them all over the place, creating space for others. I actually thought, after praising him to the hilt in my last video, I didn't actually think Dominic Solanke played very well. I thought he came on, just looked a little bit off the pace, struggled a bit with the surface. Didn't help that they kept lumping long balls up to him for some reason, Spurs, rather than playing the ball into his feet and around him. I can't remember his name now, but he had a big central defender behind him who was getting to the ball more often than not. I mean, he did help force the goal that finally Spurs kind of opened the scoring with when Pedro Porro, quick free kick, down the side of the wall to Brennan Johnson. Brennan Johnson has a shot that's kind of blocked / deflected across the face of goal. And Nathan Shakuna, unfortunately for him, gets there just ahead of Solanke, and I think it bounced off his knee and into the net. But actually the 3 other extra time subs who came on for the start of extra time, I thought they all did exactly what was required of them. Sonny came on, showed a bit more quality than nonetheless, certainly a lot more quality than Werner was, put in a lovely ball lovely ball into the path of Kulusevski. Kulusevski hits a very clinical finish into the bottom right corner. And then you had Djed Spence, who came on as a centre-back for Radu Dragisin. I'd hope it was just a precautionary, Dragisin coming off and not making him play 2 hours. There's some people suggested they saw him kind of go over on his ankle. Couldn't really see that from where we were. We were right down one end. So by that point, it was the second half. Was Spurs were shooting towards the goal that we were standing next to with the Spurs fans. So I don't know, to be honest. Postecoglou didn't mention anything afterwards. We'll find out a bit more. Maybe press conference on Tuesday ahead of the Arsenal game. But yeah, you'd hope it was just precautionary. But yeah, so Djed Spence comes on, playing as a centre-back, and he just kept looking to advance like he was a right-back. I just kind of forgot he was playing as a centre-back at times. Played a really nice sweeping diagonal ball out to Son in the build-up to the second goal, and then he got down the right-hand side, a bit of a link-up with Kulusevski really nicely. Before getting the ball across, it was kind of, I think a player got his foot to it, Tamworth defender, knocked it out, looked like a Tamworth player at the edge of the box, and yeah, Kulusevski steals in there, gets the ball, knocks it across to Brennan Johnson, and Brennan Johnson curls it into the top, kind of just inside the left-hand post. Yeah, Djed Spence, another positive performance. He's just on a brilliant roll right now. It was a funny little moment. We were stood. I don't know why we stayed there, because we were told we weren't probably going to get a player after the game, but we're just kind of. It's not often you can be that close to everything and all the players and what they're doing and watching the funny little ways. And they were kind of being taken in groups by security people past like the throng of fans to get to their coach. And you just saw little moments like Radu Dragisin waiting to kind of go and waiting for a security guard. And Radu is a big lad. And actually think about that. It wasn't limping or anything like that. Not that I can remember. But he's a big lad and he's kind of thinking like, do I wait for a security guard or do you just go? Because I'm going to handle myself, whatever kind of thing. And he eventually just went off for himself. But yeah, we could see them all kind of gathering in this area. And it was a fun little moment. And bearing in mind, we know Postecoglou doesn't do small talk or like small talk. It was him and a couple of the players, and Djed Spence was one of them. And Djed was standing there. Everyone else has kind of come out in their tracksuits with their, most of them with their hoods up and all that, like they often do after games. And Djed is there with sunglasses on and his big kind of woolly hat sitting really high up on his head, up in the air. And it looked very cool. It did look very cool. But Ange was just a bit obsessed, I think, with his hat, this kind of furry hat that he had. And he was just like kept looking at it and laughing and cracking up. And he was saying something to Spence that was making Spence laugh as well. And it was so kind of un-Ange-like. We're not used to seeing him, even when you see him in what we kind of feels like his natural environment or his football environment anyway. You see him say the odd thing to players, kind of has these little motivational bits and pieces he'll say to them. But this, yeah, it was quite unusual. And who knows? Maybe there's a little kind of Ange Spence, Ange Djed relationship kind of forming, because you go back to when he was getting a tough time from the away fans after that one game, and it was Djed Spence who came over and put his hand on his shoulder and all that, and who knows? Maybe they've forged this little kind of bond now, and obviously. Ange is playing him every week. Admittedly, there's not a lot of options to do otherwise, but Djed is being terrific. He's playing so well. I would love that to be a little kind of, I'm not sure it's going to be a friendship, but, I'd like it to, just to kind of, it would be a funny little, kind of makes you think of some kind of buddy cop movie. Can you imagine a buddy cop movie with Djed Spence and Ange Postecoglou? That would be brilliant. I would pay to watch that. I know they're probably not going to be the best actors in the world, but it would just be so mismatched. It would be, it would be. I'm trying to think of some kind of buddy movies where one's been significantly younger like that. I suppose Men in Black, Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, there's probably a big age gap there. And I'm sure there's many other age gap movies. I don't know why I've gone down that path with all of this, But yeah, no, it was just nice it's just one of those little things that kind of made me laugh. And watching them all, watching James Maddison was down there, kept phoning someone, and then we realised, I think, that it was Mark Albrighton, his former Leicester teammate, who was there, and he came up, and there was definitely some lady he met disconnected to that who he must have known from when he was younger. It was like a really nice scene. He was really genuinely kind of delighted to see this lady he clearly hadn't seen in years. And you just get to see all this. You see Archie Gray kind of doing more interacting with the fans as well, and Will Lancashire and Mikey Moore kind of sticking together. I'm someone that you might have noticed by now. I love kind of observing all of this sort of stuff, not in a weird kind of voyeuristic way, but I think I'm just kind of a bit of a people watcher. You know, sometimes when you're kind of sitting around waiting for stuff and you just kind of just watch what people do and watch the world go by, and with football, I just try and notice as much as possible. So I loved all of that. It was really nice to see these different aspects of it, and yeah, I mean, I think we've probably covered enough of the positives, really. We need to talk about some of the negatives of the game, especially those 90 minutes. I can't really get... We've got to start at Timo Werner. I was trying to think of somewhere else we can start, but we've just got to speak of Timo. Postecoglou said on Friday, he was asked by, I think it was Tom Barkley from The Sun, I think it was, whether there was any chance that Timo would leave in this window, because there's been links, I think Eintracht Frankfurt, I think, have been linked with him. So is there any chance that Timo would be heading back to Germany? And he completely ruled it out. And he said, no, look, I can't afford to lose anyone. He said the other day when Rodrigo went off Bentancur, I looked at it and it's like, we've got 11 fit players or something like that, senior players. So in his mind, he can't allow someone to go just purely because there's so many injuries. But this was another really frustrating display. I know he was playing a little bit out of position and playing as a central striker, but he just lacks conviction in so much of what he does. I find him, I was talking with George from Press Association about this, I find him probably one of the most frustrating footballers I've ever watched. And look, we've watched Tongi on Dembele. We know frustrating footballers who don't see out fulfill their potential. And with Timo, there's so many elements to his game. And I think I said this in the previous one. I made the mistake of watching a compilation video of when he was at Leipzig when he was young, and the phenomenal player he was that made Chelsea pay all that money for him. So you know it's there. You know he's got the pace, and he does have elements of technique, but it's just wildly inconsistent. And he did have an eye for a goal. And you just watch him now, and he's just this bag of kind of insecurities, and just, he's a Champions League winner, but it's almost like he doesn't know he won it. He kind of just has no belief in what he does. And I said this in the last video, but I just saw it so many times again. And this was against non-league opposition. When there's a straight, flat foot race for the ball, Timo Werner's pace should get him there ahead of a big centre-back. He should be flying past them. And he kind of starts and he just goes, nah, I'm not going to get there. And it's just like this really sad kind of thing to watch, in a way. Just to have zero confidence in your own ability, and this really kind of meek surrender when there's any kind of physical challenge with him. Like I say, it's in such stark contrast to the videos I see of him as a Leipzig player when he was young, and he would attack everything. He would fly past every player. I don't know whether he's struggling with a few kind of muscle knocks and little tight niggles with his hamstrings, or I don't know. But I just wonder what stops him from going all out to get that ball at times. I do wonder whether that's the thing with Johnson as well, Brennan Johnson. We'll talk about him in a minute. But with Timo, it's like he's going to plummet down that pecking order as people start coming back. You know, if you're looking at the bench, you're probably going to bring on Mikey Moore, despite the fact he's 17 ahead of him, because he's more unpredictable and he can get past a player and he can make things happen. Whereas Timo can do that sometimes, but the final ball at the end of it is just this kind of the samey thing each time. Yeah, I just find him so frustrating. I really do. It's almost like the English game has kind of chewed him up and spat him out, and he's never really recovered from it. Pedro Porro, I don't think had a good game either. I mean, he did obviously kind of was involved in that first Spurs goal with a clever quick free kick, but he struggled up against Emery Beck-Ray 22-year-old Tamworth winger who works in the high street clothing shop Zara. He's a part-time player. That's his day job, is working Zara. I think someone was saying he got a promotion recently. I think he works kind of in a different department within the shop. And you kind of think, this is a guy that has to squeeze in training after his days at Zara, working there. And Timo Werner, Pedro Porro is not able to deal with him on a number of occasions. A lot of attacks came down that side. He touched the ball more than anyone else on the pitch, 149 times, which is mad. But I think, looking at one of the stats I saw, he lost the ball 45 times. That's incredible. And I saw another stat. In the Premier League, Porro has lost possession more times than any other player in Europe's top 5 leagues this season. He's lost the ball 349 times this season in the Premier League, which is madness. Like, I know he does create a lot more for Spurs. He likes to play those kind of curling passes down the wing. He likes to try and pick out people with a crossfield ball or put it over the top into their runs. But he's still got to be so much more careful and with what he does. Some of his passes are just a bit reckless. He struggled. He did struggle against a non-league winger who is a shop worker for the bulk of his working days. Who else? Sergio Reguilon was all right, bearing in mind he was playing 2 hours of football when that's probably more than his combined total at Spurs for the last few years. I don't think he was awful. Pat Matasar, I would have wanted to see more from. I think as one of the fresh players who was suspended against Liverpool with Maddison, I would have wanted to see more. I didn't think he was very good on the ball. And Brennan Johnson. Brennan Johnson, for me, he just was one of those familiar, strange games from Johnson, in that there's long periods where he looks completely ineffective, and he's doing that kind of slightly annoying thing where he'll just run one step and then hit a low kind of stabbed cross across the box rather than trying to get past his man. Again, he's got such pace, and I do wonder whether that hamstring injury, albeit last season against Arsenal, whether he just really worries about opening his legs and going full throttle at players anymore. But it's a shame, because I think if he can bring that back into his game, allied with everything else he's doing, he'd be flying. Because this is the thing with Johnson, in that he's got an ability this season, which is great, that even when he's not contributing on a consistent basis in each move, he still contributes with a key moment or 2 or 3 in a game. And that was exactly what happened against Tamworth. You know, whether it was a deflected shot that led to the own goal, whether it was the pass to Timo Werner when he ran through, I think that was Johnson as well, or whether it was just the really lovely finish from Kulusevski winning the ball back to him. He just can impact matches. And again, look, you could quite rightly say, should a £50 million player be doing more against a non-league side? Absolutely, of course. But he makes these key contributions regardless of the opposition. And it now means that he's back clear again as the top scorer at Spurs this season with 12 goals, 3 assists in his 31 matches. So you're looking at almost kind of roughly half of 1 in every other game he's contributing a goal involvement, which is pretty good. It's just kind of, I see people kind of going at him on social media, and you kind of think, but he's still putting numbers up there. And you can't pad out stats with goals, because goals are what the game's about. That's a very important thing. You could, of course, say that the goal against Tamworth was the 3rd goal against a tiring team. Of course, if you want to say that, that's fine. But then he's scored a lot of other goals as well this season, and I think they'll continue to go up as well. And that, for me, is what elevates Johnson above Werner, is that both of them, I feel, don't go and beat their man enough. You know, they both only went on 1 dribble each. Bear in mind, for context, Mikey Moore went on 4 successful dribbles. James Maddison went on 4 as well. But I just kind of feel like, Johnson is the one that still contributes in key moments, regardless of whether he's on form or not, or playing well in a particular game. And I did think he was one of the ones that struggled at times with the bounce on the pitch, and then at other times took really nice touches. It was very strange. But yeah. Here's the Postecoglou quotes on the day itself. Firstly, credit to Tamworth. I thought they gave everything and gave a really good account of themselves. We knew it would be a challenging afternoon for us, with the surface making it really difficult for us to play in the manner we wanted to. It is easy to get frustrated on days like this, but the lads kept their heads clear and calm and persisted and eventually overpowered them. And someone asked him, like, did you relish this being in the FA Cup? He only got 2 goes at it, didn't he, last season? And this was something that he would have watched with his dad, Jim, on the TV, very in the early hours, late night in Australia. So, did he relish kind of being part of this competition against a non-league team, Magic of the Cup and all that? And he said, why wouldn't you? It's the beauty of this tournament. I'm sure all at Tamworth will remember the day, as they should, because their team played really well, and we will remember it too, because it's a unique experience for us in terms of the kind of challenge we had today. I enjoyed it. It was a good day. I asked Postecoglou you might see, it was weird. The way we were stood by the side of the pitch next to Spurs fans, we actually thought as journalists that we were going to end up getting like mates who are watching on the telly going, oh, saw you at the game, could see you at the game kind of thing. But actually, no one said that, so we must have just not turned up in the background of anything. But instead, I've had everyone tagging me in because the press conference we had on the pitch, we're kind of just gathered round them, around Postecoglou. Although some people got very close to him. I hope everyone, no one was ill or anything, because they did get in a bit close. But I was kind of off to the side of him. And yeah, I think some people look at the photos. It's really weird photos of me. I just look really serious. I don't know why I look so serious, like I'm glaring at him. I'm probably just listening intently. And I did ask him a question. Someone was like, why were you just lurking there? I was like, no, it was a press conference. I was involved. I did ask a question. And I asked him whether it was frustrating that, he had players like Basuma, Porro, Johnson and Gray, most, if not all of them, are going to play against Arsenal in a week. But yet they've played 2 hours in a match against a non-league team that it should never have got to that stage for them to do that. And he said, no, the main thing is that we got the job done and we got through. Whether it's 90 minutes or whatever it was, we would have preferred to have finished it off earlier, but it was the end of the day. But at the end of the day, we got through to the next round, and that's the main thing. I guess one aspect of the way the game played out was that Spurs had so much of the ball, so many passes, something like 1,000, 1,200 passes or something in the game, is that they weren't probably doing as much running as they would normally do anyway. It was mostly would have been Tamworth chasing the ball and things like that. Perhaps if they'd done a little bit more running, maybe they would have wrapped it up in normal time. But yeah, they didn't probably do too much running, and then he was able to keep key players. I'm saying that Solanke came on at the hour, didn't he? So he has actually ended up playing an hour or so. And Burival as well, but then Son, Kulusevski and Spence have all kind of just got a little brief bit of time in that half hour or so. But as it was, as the day progressed, Arsenal were taken to extra time as well by Man United, and we obviously know what happened in that one, that they went on to lose on penalties. But I looked it up. So Saliba, Gabriel, Odegaard, Havertz and Martinelli all played the full 2 hours against United. And you might well have seen Gabriel Jesus was stretched it off with I think it was a knee injury, I think they said. So yeah, Arsenal have used the real spine of their team there across 2 hours today. And, yesterday when you're watching this. But how that impacts things, I don't know. We'll see. And whether that kind of gives Spurs a bit of advantage as the game goes on. Maybe they'll be that little bit fresher. I don't know. We'll see. But this is a Spurs team that has double figures of injuries or suspension, and actually not suspension now, finally. Although Bentancur got the protocols, the concussion protocols. It's a strange one, that. In terms of, we could see it was a head injury. You can see the way, I saw a new angle of it, and you can really see the way he whips his head down into the turf. Yet there was no concussion sub used at the time, yet now it's he's in the concussion protocol. I feel like he wasn't available for the Arsenal game because of that. Well, it wouldn't be if it was 2 weeks, which I think they were suggesting. Then I'm trying to think if it'd be available for Everton or not. I'm trying to think what time kickoff was now. It was an earlier kickoff, wasn't it? I need to check. One of those where you start doubting yourself. Oh no, sorry, it was 8 o'clock on a Wednesday, wasn't it? So no, I'd imagine he'd be back by Hoffenheim at that rate, because that's the Thursday. If they have to stick to the 14 days, I can't remember if it ended up being a 12. I don't know. I don't want to speculate because I've absolutely no medical expertise whatsoever. Actually, on the topic of medical stuff, people have kind of pointed out there's been a few jobs kind of on. I've gone online and everything to kind of get new people. I think one was head of medical men. I think the men's team. From what I understand, I think all the medical stuff. It's not part of a new review. I think that's part of the one they did a year ago. And these are the kind of the next phase of the appointments they wanted to make as well. Head of medical men is not the big head honcho. I think obviously he's in charge of the men's stuff, but I think it's he and the women's one will report into. The name's completely gone out of my head. There is someone above. Essentially, Jeff Scott, who was the New Zealander who was there at Spurs for 20 years, I think he was. He had a job that was kind of performance, but also medicine, I think, if I remember correctly. So kind of they've had to build that up with different people to kind of fill that entire gap. And yeah, from what I understand, these appointments are part of the review from a year ago, not a new review that's been taking place. But ultimately, of course, it will bring in new medical staff eventually. So yeah, sorry, just the word medical went in my head. It reminded me of one of those adverts that was doing the rounds. But yeah, we've had the fourth round draw, which has not been kind to Spurs. We were kind of watching it all kind of coming out of the hat, as it were, or the bag. And it was just like, oh, there's a good draw. Oh, there's a good team that would like to play on. And then it's just Villa away, and we just all kind of knew it's like, oh, it's going to be Spurs, isn't it? So Villa away is to be fair, a ground that Spurs haven't actually done that badly in recent years, but still, you wouldn't pick that out of all of the teams that were available. And it also comes the weekend after the Liverpool Carabao Cup semi-final second leg as well. So that's not great because that's two really tough games within a couple of days, away games as well. Yeah, look, what I would say, and actual Villa have also got no midweek game match that week as well, so they're going to be fresh for that cup tie. Yeah, look, they've done it the hard way in the Carabao Cup so far. You know, beaten Man City, they've beaten Man United, they're 1-0 up currently at half time against Liverpool, so they know how to go into these games. These big cup games and find a way through. So they've got that as well to their name. And they may well also have various players back. They may have new faces by that point as well. So I don't think they'll fear the game. It just could have been a little bit kinder, the draw. You know, maybe meet Villa a little bit later in the competition rather than the fourth round. Yeah, you know, it's just the way Tottenham are. Who knows what's going to happen? You know, played so well against Liverpool, beat them, and in the next game struggle for periods against a non-league team. It's just madness. They are a mad side. And yeah, so who knows what the start of February will bring when that game does eventually come around. Still a load more football to be played before we even get to that point. And look, I think the way I kind of look at this result is that there's been various points this season where Spurs have played quite well in games and not got the result that maybe they deserved. Whereas in this game, didn't really play well, especially for the 90 minutes, but they've come away with a 3-0 win that the record books will show a 3-0 win. They won't say that Tamworth will always remember this, but how terrific Tamworth were and how they battled for everything and how they held a Premier League team that has won the FA Cup, like I said, 8 times. They've held them for 90 minutes and really could have won it at the death in those 90 minutes had they just connected with the ball a little bit better. Or Kinski was not quite as on the ball as he was. So yeah, maybe this is a little balance to them not getting the results they probably should have at points, especially earlier in the season as well. But yeah, if we're looking at it purely on paper and we're ignoring who the opposition are, which I know you shouldn't, but this is the way that when you look back at history, a lot of that happens. If you're looking at it on paper, it's back-to-back wins for the first time in about a month. Back-to-back clean sheets for the first time since September, I think, which is just mad. And yeah, it kind of feels like it's all leading now towards this Wednesday night showdown at the Emirates. Arsenal maybe stumbling a little bit of points and losing players to injury. And obviously they've lost Saka as well. And now it looks like Gabriel Jesus as well. Why do I feel like I maybe called him a completely different name earlier? I hope I didn't. But yeah, it's another game where Postecoglou's have to kind of try and get the most out of this group of players that you can once again. Who will they have back? Maybe Richarlison involved. It might become too soon for him. I think it was 2 weeks or so he's going to get of training. Maybe they pop him on the bench this time just in case, or even just to get him involved and he can come on for a minute or two at the end. But certainly he'll be there. Mikey Moore will have had more of a kind of minutes in his legs, pardon the pun, more of a. And other than that, though, it's the same bunch. But I would say that Arsenal probably used. I know they were up against 10 men for the half an hour of normal time and the half an hour of extra time, but they still played the core of their team through the 2 hours. Whereas with Spurs, the likes of Son and Kulusevski, Bergvall, Solanke, Spence all got kind of more of a rest. So they should be fresher on the whole, I would say. But yeah, the Emirates. It is a place that has brought mostly pain. It would be wonderful to go there and get something, but it is going to be an incredibly tough task. It is. They've got the set pieces, which is something that Spurs, never been the greatest at, but back-to-back clean sheets will have helped the confidence a bit, I think, as well. And a new goalkeeper who seems to be pretty decent with his handling, nice and clean with it so far. But this will be his biggest test yet, even more so than Liverpool, I would say, in terms of going into the Lions' den and not being put off by some of their tactics around set pieces as well. And I think there's a lot on the team. I know they scored 3 goals in the end as Tamworth tired, but I think there's a lot on them to create a lot in this game as well. And, as we've said, maybe having less of the ball when Arsenal kind of pushing them back a bit, so Spurs have to counter and attack on the break, maybe that will suit some of their players as well. But we'll see. We'll see. It's a game I always hate. It's a game that I will go to kind of not reluctantly, because I do love covering football regardless, but still just never enjoy games at that stadium. I never really enjoy North London derbies unless Spurs have won them. I find them such kind of too tense, the affairs, really. Not too tense like a campsite. Not a very busy campsite, but you know what I mean. Right, I should really head off because I am absolutely. It's very, very late at night. I'm not even going to say what the time is. My early start is starting to catch up with me. When I was doing my work before doing this, I was actually nodding off at my keyboard. So I am shocked that I've got this far without nodding off. I'm sure many of you have done, while I haven't. But yeah, we got to the end of it. Hopefully, we'll see some movement in terms of transfers. Nothing really at this point on the Sunday to kind of go into on them. Obviously, there's still been more Mawani talk that maybe he's going to have a choice between potentially Juventus and Spurs and others that are kind of watching the situation as well. And just Spurs looking at various other things. Will they sign a centre-back, or will they decide it's too close now to others coming back and they'll have a bunch of centre-backs? I still would try to myself, because I think Archie Gray and Brennan Johnson are going to end up getting injured at some point if they just keep playing every 3 days. And there's a part of me that still would like a left. Maybe you could just nail both by getting a centre-back who can play at left-back, and then they are going to get minutes beyond when other people start coming back as well. But we'll see, and who knows other ones. I've said that they've kind of in the past that they've been looking at potentially a midfielder as well. So maybe we'll see something like that. And certainly, like I said, and Ange has admitted, an attacker is what they want as well. So yeah, they're going to have to get that done, because the quicker they can get it done, the more options they're going to have for some of these games coming straight up in the near future. Because there's some big games. They really are. Right, must head off. This is going to be up early on Monday morning for people that are up early. I won't be. I will definitely be sleeping when this goes online, because I'm going to need to catch up on some sleep after this. And next one, excuse me, will be Thursday at some point, with the game on Wednesday night. Oh, please be a really positive North London derby one for me to talk about. There's not been many of those over the years. That would be lovely to be able to do that. My voice is starting to give up on me as well late at night. Right, time to head off. I shall speak to you on Thursday. If I speak to you earlier, it's because something transfer related has kind of pushed on a fair bit. So hopefully I'll speak to you earlier. We'll see. But otherwise, stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.